On today's episode, Toughest Mudder Chicago preview with Eric Dymesich. This is the world's toughest podcast. Welcome to the world's toughest podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's world's toughest mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the world's toughest podcast. This weekend is the sixth and final toughest mudder. It is going to be awesome. Each toughest has had their own flavor, their own thing that made them the toughest. LA had ridiculous hills and a brutal Arctic enema. Whistler had amazing scenery and a soul-crushing ski hill for the second half of the race. Atlanta had an insane mud mile and that terrible airport you had to travel through. But Chicago is going to be even better. I cannot wait. We're going to talk all about Chicago in a minute, but I want to talk about a few other things real quick. First, I tried something last week on the World's Toughest Podcast Facebook page, facebook.com/World's Toughest Pod. We had a call-in show. Now, I know that's revolutionary, having people call in to a radio show. That's never been done before. And I had a good time. It went great. The callers had a good time, I think. But the audio did not have a good time. So it sounds bad, like real bad. So, Drake, I am sorry, but I can't use that audio as an episode. I'm going to figure out what went wrong and do it again, though. So if you want to find out about that next time we do it, if you want to call in and get on the podcast, make sure you like the page, facebook.com/World's Toughest Pod. Next, I've talked about the M. Stefano running podcast before. Mike Stefano has a team of him and his friends that run road races and OCRs and talk about them afterwards. Lately, Mike has been taping his races on GoPro and then interspersing clips of the audio in the episodes while he's talking about them. It adds a nice dimension to his race reviews. At about 13 minutes into his latest episode, episode 33, Mike plays the audio from the start line of Tough Mudder Northeast in New Hampshire. And it's the audio of the guy, the start line guy. It's not Sean Corvell, but he's fine. He's fine. But I've done 20-something Tough Mudders, most of them on the West Coast. And I've had Sean Corvell at all of them except maybe 3. And saying Sean is the best at his job is selling him short. Sean isn't even doing the same job as everybody else. He's literally on another level. It's not fair to compare the other guys to Sean. I've told the story before about how someone asked Johnny Cash once who the best country and western singer was. And Johnny Cash answered him, "You mean besides George Jones?" And so if anyone ever asks who the best start line MC is, the answer is, you mean besides Sean Corvell? And I say this with all respect to those other start line guys. It's not an easy job getting a bunch of strangers hyped up. They're hot. They want to go run. And you got to get them all motivated before they go. It's not an easy job. I'm not insulting or slighting those guys in any way. But Sean is on an entirely different level. I know that's not exactly a controversial opinion in this neck of the woods. Like, hot take, Sean's really good, guys. But I was reminded of it this week. You guys should check out that podcast. And don't take Sean for granted, guys. Any of you. Anyway, Mike Stefano's podcast. After the race, Mike was talking to his friends, and most of them were experienced OCR runners, but first-time Tough Mudder runners. And Mike's co-host, Caitlin, asked them an interesting question.
And how do we feel about the headbands compared to a medal?
That's a great question. Do you prefer a headband, or do you wish Tough Mudder gave you a medal at the end of each race? I know it might sound obvious to you, but I've never really thought about it. I just take the headband and enjoy it. Which would you prefer, a headband or a medal? Here's what Mike's friends thought.
And how do we feel about the headbands compared to a medal?
Yeah, no, definitely headbands over the medal all day.
Headbands over medal.
No preference.
I don't know what we're talking about.
That answer cracked me up.
No preference.
I don't know what we're talking about.
Mike, I know we talked about meeting up in Vegas. Would you like to meet up before World's Toughest or after?
No preference.
I don't know what we're talking about.
Keith Allen, is it events or laps for the headband count?
No preference.
I don't know what we're talking about.
Mom, I'm your favorite, right?
No preference.
I don't know what we're talking about.
I knew it. Before we talk Toughest Mudder Chicago, let's read some iTunes reviews. I wish I could rate this 7 stars. By Documentary Lover, 5 stars. Will Hicks has a voice for radio. If I could dream of a podcast that was about nothing but one event, or really 6 regional events in one event, or all those plus like a 5K thing, that would be great. Also, when you have Keith Allen on, he is awesome. He mentions the Obstacle Racing Media podcast more times than you do, and I did not think that was possible. Thank you, Documentary Lover, I think. I appreciate the kind words. Gym Owner / OCR Athlete by Ryan Scully, 5 stars. Best podcast ever. Will Hicks is consistently up to speed on all things Tough Mudder, and his in-depth knowledge of OCR makes for an incredible listening experience. Each week I look forward to hearing the next episode, and I have never been so addicted to a podcast in my life. Thanks for being one of the highlights of my week, Will Hicks. Keep these episodes rolling. Thank you, Ryan Scully. Ryan actually sent me a couple of messages on Facebook, and we traded back and forth, talked Toughest Mudder Chicago a bit, gave him a sneak preview of the episode. Feel free to shoot me an email on Facebook, World's Toughest Podcast Facebook page. Last review of the week, 5 stars by Tamagotchi. If podcasts were... Oh, that's clever. Tamagotchi went to the iTunes store and brought some jokes with him. Tamagotchi, this is a family show. Your World's Toughest Family is listening. Last week I said something like, if you want to hear your words on the air, leave an iTunes review. And Tamagotchi said, aha, I've got one. Tamagotchi, do you want me to read your review or should I just skip it?
No preference.
I don't know what we're talking about.
By Tamagotchi, 5 stars. If podcasts were exciting to gentlemen, this podcast would be dangerous to walk by. You can read the original version on iTunes. Search for Tough Mudder. If you've got jokes, you can leave a review on iTunes also. If you don't have jokes, you can also leave a review. Search iTunes for Tough Mudder. We are the first podcast that pops up. Click our logo and then click ratings and reviews. Click write a review and you are good to go. You can also do it straight from your iPhone in the podcast app. I appreciate every review. I appreciate almost every review. Last thing before we talk Toughest Mudder Chicago. Team 3 Rex, it's a group of 4 people, John Glines, Taylor Glines, Heather Heaton, and Laura Pilati, are doing their pit crew headbands again this year. If you got one for your pit crew last year, you need to get one again this year because this year's version is better, way better. They're blue like last year, and they have the World's Toughest logo on the front with the words World's Toughest Mudder. Around the back, it says Pit Crew 2017 Las Vegas. These are collector's items, people. Your pit crew works hard for you. Buy them a headband. And don't give it to them at the end of the race like they earned it. Give it to them at the beginning. There's going to be people setting up tents and wearing them for the full 24 hours. Let them enjoy those headbands you bought for them. The headbands are $20 each, with the money going to Team Rubicon, the official charity partner of Tough Mudder. You can find a link to buy them on the World's Toughest Mudder community page or on the World's Toughest podcast page, facebook.com/World's Toughest Pod. Let's talk Toughest Mudder Chicago. We're going to talk with Eric Dymesich about the course in a few minutes. But first, let's talk about the elites for a bit. This is the 6th and last Toughest Mudder of the year. There's a bonus of $10,000 each for the man and woman with the highest cumulative miles from their 3 best Toughest Mudder races. So let's talk about the men, and then we'll talk about the women as far as who is going to win that $10,000 bonus. For the men, Ryan Atkins has this almost locked down. He has 145 miles from his wins at LA, Atlanta, and Whistler. In second place are Trevor Psychos and Austin Azar, both with 120 miles. Trevor will not be at Toughest Chicago. I have not heard if Austin will be there, but even if they were both there, they would have to run 65 miles in 8 hours just to tie Atkins. Atkins doesn't have to worry about Azar or Psychos. However, if Chad Trammell races in Chicago, he has a legitimate shot at Atkins. Trammell's only run 2 toughest mudders this year. He got second place in LA with 50 miles, narrowly losing to Ryan Atkins in the last lap. And he got second place at Toughest Mudder Europe with 45 miles. And there he finished behind Ryan Atkins' $100,000 winning partner, John Albin, who got first place with 50 miles. So Trammell has 50 and 45. Atkins has 50, 50, and 45 for his 3 races. If Trammell can get 50 in Chicago and Atkins gets no more than 45, Trammell will tie Atkins for the $10,000. And I believe they would split that prize. If Trammell can get 55 and Atkins gets 45 or less, Trammell will win the $10,000 outright. But barring catastrophe, that's not going to happen. Trammell has a narrow path to victory, but it is possible. Of course, if they tie in Chicago, or if Atkins beats Trammell outright this weekend, then Ryan Atkins would win the $10,000 prize outright. On the women's side, for the $10,000 bonus, Lindsay Webster is in the driver's seat in first place with 120 miles for her 3 races. Her top 3 finishes are 45, 40, and 35 miles. 10 miles behind her in second place is Allison Ty. Ty's top 3 finishes are 40, 35, and 35 miles. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Webster is not running in Chicago. Allison Ty is. If Ty gets 45 miles, which is totally doable, she will tie Webster for first place with 120 miles. Sarah Knight is in third place in a similar position. If she finishes with 50 miles, she will also have 120 miles. And, okay, this would be crazy, but Chikorita is in fourth place with 100 miles. If she finishes Chicago with 50 miles, she would also have 120 miles over her top 3 races. So, to summarize, Lindsay Webster has locked in her 120 miles. To tie her, Allison Ty needs 45, Sarah Knight needs 50, and Chikorita needs 50. Depending on the course, and if they have a good day or a good night, any of those 3 women could pull it off. Lindsay is in the driver's seat, but it's not a sure thing yet. So on the men's side, as far as the individual race, Ryan Atkins is the clear favorite. Chad Trammell has already shown that he can hang with Atkins, and he almost beat him in LA. I mean, it was close. But almost doesn't get you those giant commemorative checks to hang on your wall. Tough Mudder has said that Mark Jones will also be there. He is a strong athlete who can make some noise as well. On the women's side, with Lindsay Webster sitting out, it is wide open. Allison Ty has already won one of these toughest mudders. She won Chicago, again, when Lindsay was sitting out a race. Sarah Knight has been to every toughest mudder in the world this year. She's finished second twice. She could win the thing. Morgan Mackay won third place at World's Toughest last year. She could win. And there's also Adrienne Alvord and Casey Northrup. I talked to Casey Northrup after she finished 4th at Canada's Toughest Mudder. She also finished 4th at Atlanta's Toughest Mudder. She told me she likes to finish close enough to touch the podium, but not on it. Casey, there is room for you on the podium in Chicago. Get on it. There are 2 names I haven't mentioned yet today. If either of them show up, they would automatically be considered a strong contender to win the race. Hunter McIntyre won World's Toughest Mudder in 2014 in the team category. That's the year of the epic sandstorm. It's also the last year that Ryan Atkins competed in the individual category before moving over to the team category to dominate that division for the past 2 years. Hunter recently won $25,000 by winning first place at the first ever Tough Mudder X, the 1-mile race with 10 obstacles and 10 functional fitness stations. Finishing in second place at TMX, Ryan Atkins. I would love to watch Atkins and McIntyre go head-to-head in Chicago. If Hunter wants a shot at the $50,000 bonus in Vegas this November, he must show up in Chicago, and he must finish in the top 5. So that's one person who might show up, Hunter McIntyre. Let me tell you one person who will show up and who will finish in the top 5. Amelia Boone. She hasn't said anything publicly that I've seen, not a word. But let me lay out some reasons why I think you'll see her there. She used to live in Chicago. It was her hometown for many years before she recently moved to Northern California a few years ago. Another reason I think we'll see Amelia in Chicago is she is training to run 100 miles right now. She's written about that on social media. Last year when she was injured at World's Toughest, she wrote if she was out there competing, it would have been 100 miles or bust. For the women, running 100 miles at Vegas and winning as an elite contender is worth $50,000. Running 100 miles and winning if you're not an elite contender is worth $10,000. It's like my old soccer coach used to tell me, if you're going to run 100 miles anyway, you might as well collect the extra $40,000. Look, I can't promise anything, but gun to my head, if you asked me, I believe we will see Amelia Boone this weekend return to Tough Mudder in Chicago. As far as the course, Toughest Mudder Chicago was an 8-hour race held on a 5-mile looped course at Rockford International Airport just outside of Chicago. The winner will complete the most 5-mile laps in the 8 hours. Looking at the map, it appears to be mostly flat, with possible rolling hills on the southeast area of the map. It will have 17 obstacles over the 5 miles. The weather for the weekend, listen to this. Expected to be 75 degrees at starting time with a 10% chance of rain and 75% humidity. Lows will drop to about 59 degrees with, quote, rain showers in the morning with thunderstorms in the afternoon. Chance of rain 90%. So they're predicting rain, fellas. The rumor is that there will be over 1,000 people at Toughest Mudder Chicago. I've heard that rumored number as high as 1,700, but I don't think that's going to happen. Up to this point, Toughest Mudder Europe has had the most people start the race with 775. Canada had the least with 245. Just as a point of reference, World's Toughest Mudder tends to have about 1,300 people each year. To talk about the course and the obstacles, we're going to talk to Eric Dymesich. Eric is new to the WTM community. 2016 was his first year at Worlds, and it was actually his first Tough Mudder event also. But he is a fast learner and finished his first year at Worlds with 50 miles and an incredible sense of the community that comes from World's Toughest. Eric is actually an old friend of mine. We used to be scuba instructors together when we were young and single. I had been after him for a while to run World's Toughest with me, and he finally did. Let's go to the phones and talk with Eric Dymesich. Eric Dymesich, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Will?
Eric, tell me about your first World's Toughest Mudder.
It was quite an experience. To be honest, if it wasn't for you, Will, I would have never done it. Last year, I ran my first marathon ever, and the day of the marathon, I told my wife, I'm like, this is crazy. I'm never doing this again. And the day after, I was like, I'm doing Worlds. Because you had invited me to go down there, and I went. And I don't know, I was totally sold. Like, I think one of the biggest things is like the community of it. Because I'm Iraq war veteran, and like the brotherhood that combat like builds. Because you go through this like really hard time together, and you experience loss and all this stuff, and it like pulls you so close. And like since I came back and got out of the military, I've missed that. And then once I, did the World's Toughest, there's like this family, like this camaraderie, and you're doing something hard together, and it's just so cool. And I think one of the other things that's so cool that really sold me on that, which I love so much, is that like, we're running a course with some of the like top athletes of the world. Like Amelia Boone was there, at the start gate, like giving us high fives coming around and stuff. And, like where else do you get to do that? And it was so cool and it was so epic. Getting to run the exact same course, with some of the top athletes of the world, and just like how down to earth everybody was. Like during the night, it was, like 1 or 2, maybe 3 in the morning, and like Stephanie Bishop ran up, next to me, and like her and I ran together for like a half a mile. And then we came to Backstabber, and she just like waited in line, and I was like, hey, I'm like contender here, to everybody else in front, so they let her through. It's like, where else do you get to do this? It's like, it'd be like being able to play in like the Super Bowl or in the NFL or something. Just like the family and the camaraderie and all that, it was just, when I started running, I think like the first 8 hours of the course, like I couldn't stop smiling. It was just so cool. I don't know. It had me hooked. I was like, man, I got to do this. And I felt like, I think some of the passion that like you felt, with like Tough Mudder and World's Toughest Mudder, and that's why you work so hard to like, get me to come there, and a couple other guys, it's contagious, and you want to bring, your friends or other people with you. You want them to experience it as well.
Have you had a hard time describing that feeling to people who haven't been there?
I think so. I remember, like at Worlds there, I ran on my 10th lap. I injured myself on the pyramid scheme, and I finished that 10th lap, and it was like 19 hours in. And I called home and to talk to my wife, and I like started crying, and I think the physical exhaustion and all this, and she started crying too, and I'm like, what's wrong? Well, I didn't get this till later when I got home, but she's at home struggling, like thinking like, what's this guy doing? Like, what is this that he wants to go out there and like punish his body for, 24 hours or this and that. And I think a lot of people, struggle, or they like have a hard time, grasping it. Like, what is this appeal? Like, why do you want to go out there and like push your body to the limits and see what you're made of? And until people, start like doing, an extreme sport maybe, or, endurance stuff, I don't think they really can understand it. They view us kind of as crazy, I guess. And I remember, not that many years ago, let's say driving the car and it's like, 85 degrees out, and you drive by somebody running down the road and you're like, wow, look at that fool, like I'm in air conditioning. And now I'm that guy. So, yeah, I think people, don't quite get it. They think that, we're a little crazy or this and that, but they don't understand, that like Tough Mudder is like, I don't know, it's a people sport. It's not like you have to be like this cool, like hip, like totally like in shape, person. You just go out there and you give it your best, and that's enough, and you help somebody else give their best too. And that's, I think that's the whole thing about like the Tough Mudder community, that makes it so cool. Where, like a marathon or other sports like that, you don't really see that. It's more of like an individual sport.
What time of year, what month was it when you decided to sign up for Worlds?
That was October 16th. Yeah, that was the day. So, because I ran that marathon the day before, and then the day after, there was like this mental block, like I couldn't do two things. And so as soon as I did that marathon, I was like, hey, I'm doing it. So yeah, it was basically 1 month before Worlds.
So you'd been training, you've been doing some running for your marathon, but you hadn't been specifically training for World's Toughest.
Yeah, that's correct. And last year, like going into it, I was really undertrained. I got injured there at, like probably, well, with penalty laps, it was probably like about 50 miles, but on like mile 46 or 47, and I finished that 50 miles, but like I beat myself up, I pushed too hard. I ended up going to my doctor later, like a month later, when I was still fighting injuries, and I'd pulled the tendons in the bottom of my feet from overuse and one of my calves. and he told me then, he's like, hey, he's like, you just can't decide to go out and run 50 miles. He's like, if you want to keep doing this, he's like, you're going to have to get some books and start reading. And that was really good for me because, since then I've done that and I've learned a lot. And this year, going into it, I'm definitely in a lot better shape as far as endurance-wise. And I feel more confident, so.
You got 50 miles your first time at World's Toughest Mudder, but that wasn't just your first Worlds. That was actually your first Tough Mudder event, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, like most of the people that are there, they're like, Legionnaires and like all this. And, and I was hanging out with you, and so you're like, oh, yeah, this is so-and-so and so-and-so. And, like, it's just names to me. Like, I don't know these people. Like, I don't know who Ryan Atkins is. And so it's like total immersion all at once. And, and I didn't know what to expect. And thankfully, like, you were like kind of giving us the lowdown on like this obstacle and that obstacle. So, I really like the week before I had like pre-race and anxiety. I was like, holy man, like what did I get myself into? So, but yeah, it was just so cool. And, I went out there and I just gave it my best. And I think a big key was, I kind of look at it like the run is the rest period, minus a few of those big hills. But a big thing is what my brother and I are running Chicago here this weekend. And I told him, I'm like, when you come to an obstacle, I'm like, just do it. Like, don't stop. Like, I see a lot of people would stop and they'd think about it and they'd get like psyched up and like nervous. And I'd come to them and I'd just blast right through the obstacle. And then, I had the run to the next one to like rest and like, get ready. And then the next one I'd blast through. And so I had a lot of people, like I'd pass them at the obstacle and then they'd pass me on the run and I'd pass them at the next obstacle. And then they'd just catch me by on the next run. And then pretty soon I didn't see them again. And so I think, that slow and steady on the runs, but just like blasting through those obstacles, even like the cliff, I don't know, it's nerve-wracking every time, like I'm not afraid of heights, but it's a long stinking ways down. And when you land wrong or something, it hurts. And every time I'd be like, oh man, this is crazy, but then I just jump. So, I think that was a big key to my success and being able to get the 50 miles.
Can you talk about the cliff specifically? When you ran up to it, how long did it take you from approaching it to jumping in?
I don't remember the first time, but if there was a waiting line or not, but, I'd just kind of go, I'd stand back, like the 5 or 10 feet, whatever, and they'd be like, okay, go. And I'd taken my headlamp off, and I think I like stuck it down in my like wetsuit. And then I'd just walk up to that edge, and I didn't look down. And I'm not afraid of heights, but for some reason it was like, holy cow, this is a long stinking ways. And they'd be like, go, and I'm like, like the one time I'm like, is it clear? I'm like, because I'm not looking down. I remember telling the girl, and she's like, yeah, jump. And so I just jumped, and I think I did that 3 or 4 times. I think I went off there, and it didn't get easier. It didn't. Like, that was a tough obstacle, like mentally. It was easy physically because you just step off the edge. But yeah, mentally, it's a challenge every single time.
What are some of the other tips or ways that you were able to get 50 miles your very first year?
I think, like for me, I guess I'd say my biggest issue, I look back now, like I had some like mental battles on like the King of Swingers or, that's where you have the 2 bars, you jump from the one bar to the other, right?
Mm-hmm. Double rainbow, King of Swingers.
Yeah. And that one, I actually never completed that obstacle the whole time. Like the first time, we ran that first 5-mile loop, and then we came back with the obstacles, and there was a massive like pile up there, and they let some of us go around without doing it, take the penalty. So I did. Well, then the next time I tried it and I didn't make it. because it was like really wet. It had cooled down enough then. And then I tried it one more time. Well, it threw me way out, and then I ended up having to take the penalty anyway. And so I was like, well, forget it. I'm not going to do it. I'll just jump in and take the penalty. But actually, that obstacle, like physically, it's an easy obstacle because you're just really hanging on for, maybe like 10 seconds. So that was one that I got beat mentally. Another one was Kong. I made that one, like 3 times. And I think the 4th time I didn't make it, and it had, worn me out, like trying to do it. And the rings were just slippery and they were wet. Like once it got dark, everything got wet and it wasn't drying in between. And so that one, I was taking the penalty lap every time because I just come up, it was kind of like this mental calculation, like the penalty lap is known and I take and I get it over with. So those were the 2, I guess, that I kind of struggled with. Operation, I did that obstacle every time. I got chalked twice, but I just did it, because I felt like there was some I don't know, value in completing the obstacle, even though that penalty loop was really small, but it made me feel good. And then sometime during the night, I would end up skipping the Everest 2.0. I started doing 1.0, or is it 1.0?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, so I started doing that one because I knew I could do it myself without waiting for anybody. And so I did that. But I think really the biggest thing is just slow or just being steady, minimum pit times. Because I hit my 50 miles at 19 hours, so I had time left over. And if I hadn't got injured, I could have got 60 easily, maybe 65, but there's no way I could have got 75.
What are some things that you wish you knew going in as a first-timer?
Boy, that's a good question. I had a lot of issues with my rear strobes. So I'd say technical, some gear things. That was probably, I'd say that's probably it. Just some of the gear things. My wetsuit worked out good for me. I would have had shoe gaiters because I kept thinking I had rocks in my feet, and sometimes I did. Sometimes it was just pain. And the other thing, I guess, is that I didn't. I was afraid of inflammation getting sore, so I actually took some ibuprofen on the run, and that affected my kidneys, and I was a little low on salt. So I struggled with hyponatremia, and my hands blew up so big, I couldn't even bend them towards the end of the race. So that's some things I didn't know. I was kind of strong and dumb kind of, just tough and keep going and I'll make it type thing. So, but other than that, but we had really good weather last year, so if it was colder, things would have been different too. I was afraid of the cold because I'd heard a lot about it. And so, I could have maybe made a couple laps without my wetsuit on, but I put on a little bit early. But other than that, I don't know. I'm happy with the race. I loved it. It was so much fun. And the camaraderie was just awesome. Just cool people. Just really a cool experience.
I want to talk about your hands in a second, but you mentioned your wetsuit. How thick was your wetsuit? You were happy with it?
I think I had a 3, 4, 5, a ultra stretch, whatever, some 4-way stretch thing. Yeah, I was really happy with it. I bought it on a sale for $100 or something. And then I also had a 3 mil hood, which I wore, once nightfall came.
You mentioned you thought you put your wetsuit on a little early. What time did you put your wetsuit on?
So we ran that first lap without obstacles, then the second lap, and then I think the third lap is when we put it on. So that would have been I'm guessing, maybe 4 o'clock.
We started at noon.
Yeah, so 3 something, 3 maybe. I don't know, maybe a little later. Maybe we did 2 laps. I might have did 2 laps or 3 laps without it and then put it on. But it was still daylight, and it was hot. We all got hot, that put it on early.
Yeah, that was my fault. We were running together at the beginning, and you weren't there in 2015, but I saw a lot of people getting medically pulled out because of hypothermia in 2015. So my mission in life in 2016 was just not to get pulled for hypothermia. So we kind of erred to the other extreme in 2016.
Yeah, well, on that night before at the carb load dinner, that's what Amelia Boone said. She's like, hey, don't let yourself get cold, because once you get cold, it's hard to recover from it, And so we were all like, we're not going to let that happen, But who knew, now looking back at it, we have that experience, but.
Okay, so your hands, I saw you at probably, hour 20 of the race. You were at a pit area, you're sitting in a chair, and your hands were swollen. Your fingers were probably twice their usual thickness. Like, there's like swollen, and then there's like sausage fingers. And it almost looked like a cartoon how swollen your hands had gotten. What was the cause of that, and how'd you deal with that?
Okay, so at the time, I didn't really know. I was like, oh, man, what's wrong with me or whatever. And since then I've learned a lot, about like my body and or how the body works. And so basically, it could have been a combination of like taking ibuprofen. Now I don't take ibuprofen when I run anymore, but ibuprofen can affect your kidneys so they don't process, properly. And then the other thing is I was low, on salt. And so during the run, I was thirsty all the time. And so I was drinking this water, but the water was just blowing through me. I mean, I was going to the bathroom steady, it was a problem. That was, my kidneys weren't working properly. I don't know if they were shutting down or what. And so that was part of it, and then the other thing is on a major, endurance task like that, your body will produce the lactic acid and other stuff. And then, it's basically kind of like it's, after a big run, sometimes you'll get flu symptoms, and that's because the lactic acid and all that's toxin that builds in your muscle. Because I remember after that run, we went back to the hotel and it was freezing cold and really hot and all this stuff. And so I wasn't conditioned enough, I mean, my muscles were eating themselves to get, nutrition. And so the hyponatremia and then all that, it beat me up, you remember, I mean, I could barely walk out of there. It was pretty rough, and I didn't know enough about, major endurance sports at that time. I'm just fortunate that I didn't do any long-term damage. So
as far as treatment for that or preventing that next year, no ibuprofen and more salty food or salty drinks?
Yeah, and I think, thankfully you had that pickle juice there, which saved me, because I remember I was on maybe lap 5 or something, and I was going, what was that obstacle way up on the hill?
Ladder to Hell?
Ladder to Hell, yeah. And I remember putting my leg over that and just terrible cramps. I'm holy man. And I wanted salt. I craved salt. And I was man, I got issues. If I'm going to keep in this, I got to get some salt. And so I came back to the pit, and you had that pickle juice there, and I drank 2 bottles of that. Yeah. And so I think the next 3 laps, every lap I drank pickle juice. And then within those 3 laps, I didn't have any more of those cramps. So next time I'm going to have salt available. And I even remember the night before at the carb load thing, I was man, I wish they had salt here. And that should have been a sign to me, hey, your body's, wants salt. So I was obviously low on it. So this year I'm going to make sure that I bring some good, natural salt and have it on hand. And even for this weekend, I have jerky and some salted nuts and, other stuff, so I can be taking that salt in. And then I'm going to, not take any ibuprofen during the runs, and then use it afterwards, to help recover faster.
I swear by that pickle juice stuff. There's 3 common things people use for cramps. Once you get a cramp on the course, people have salt packets, like you get at a restaurant or a fast food place, where you crack it open and you put it under your tongue. People have mustard packets, again, from a fast food place, just a little shot of mustard that you put in, and then but I swear by pickle juice. As soon as that stuff gets in your mouth, your body, you taste the salt, and it tricks your brain into like releasing the crayon. It's like magic. It really is. The salt and the mustard, they take a couple minutes, but the pickle juice is like, it's literally like magic. You can get them on Amazon, and yeah, I bring them every world, so I swear by those.
You know, I heard about that from you, and when I ran that marathon, you know, I started out too fast, and I was dying, you know, and at like mile 22, you know, I was like hoping to like trip and lay in the ditch or something. I was hurting, and my wife was there, and she's like, "Hey, want some pickle juice?" And I drank that, and it like saved my life. It was so awesome, and so by the time it came to Worlds, I was a full believer, and the stuff is awesome. Yeah, it's cool.
I don't own pickle juice or have any stock or anything. I'm just a fan. So after you did Worlds last year as your first event, this past year, 2017, you did a regular Tough Mudder in Minnesota. Tell me about that.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, they have the Holy Grail thing. So I signed up for the Tough Mudder in Minneapolis there, and I was like, and then I signed up for the Tougher. You know, I was all excited about that. We bought a 4-pack, so, you know, I got some other guys. We were going to go down there together. And then I think because they were doing the Tough X thing, they canceled the Tougher Mudder, you know, that Saturday morning. So then we just did the regular Mudder. And I don't know, it was really good, you know, like going from Worlds to the regular Tough Mudder. Like the cool thing about Worlds is that the obstacles, they're really technical. You know, they just are. Like, they're fun. They're really technical. And at a regular Mudder, they're a little more simple. But actually, like, some of them are harder. Like, you know, at Worlds, they didn't have Mud Mile. And the Mud Mile there, it was brutal. Like, you know, you couldn't do it yourself. You know, those pits were deep and they were slippery. Like, I don't think there's any way you could really do it. You know, a couple of them were easier, but I don't think there's any way you could just, like, blast through that thing. So, you know, that in, like, pyramid scheme, you know, at Worlds, they had those ropes, and you could, like, blast over that by yourself. You know, at the regular Mudder, you couldn't. You know, you needed people. But it was fun. You know, we just had a lot of fun. It was, like, a super hot day up here. It was, like, 98 degrees or something. But we had fun. It was me and my brother and then my, like, 14-year-old sister. And it was a great time, you know, and it was really cool to see people. Like the one time on the track, there was this guy, you know, I bet he was like 300 pounds and had his shirt off, you know, just chugging along. And I was like, you know, I'm like, this is so cool. Like, this is changing his life. You know, and that's the cool thing about Tough Mudder. And, you know, after that, you know, it's cool for me and my brother and sister to do together. And they're like, hey, we got to do this next year. And we're driving home. And they're like, oh, we should bring so-and-so and, you know, this person. You know, and that's really what, you know, Tough Mudder does, so.
Is your brother thinking about doing Worlds, or he's doing Toughest with you this weekend?
Yeah, he's doing Toughest. You know, the thing about Worlds, you know, it's expensive, you know, by the time you buy the ticket and your flight and all that. You know, so the nice thing about Chicago is that we can drive down there. So, yeah, he's doing it this weekend. He's never run a marathon. Well, we did a half marathon this spring that I organized myself. But, you know, he's good. Like 2 weeks ago, we did a 34-mile run on a Sunday.
Just for
fun.
You
know, so he'll be, so he'll be good for it. You know, and we did that Tough Mudder. He did that Tough Mudder with me. You know, and he's like, hey, this is so cool. Like, the obstacles make it really fun. So, yeah, so I'm excited about that. You know, it'll be cool to run, you know, through the night with him. You know, we're going to have a great time down there, so.
You are running Toughest Mudder in Chicago this weekend. Let's talk about the course and the obstacles, and you can talk about how you get through each obstacle.
So, you know, the first thing I noticed when I looked at this map is that there's a lot of water obstacles. You know, I count like 6 water obstacles plus the Arctic enema. And that's without any, like, you know, penalty water. So I don't know. I mean, last night I just bought like a 1.5 mil like wetsuit pants. So I'm hoping that maybe I can get by with that, you know, and I also have my 3 mil hood. And then I was going to just wear a dive skin top, hopefully. but I don't know. I mean, the weather could change so much. So I brought, I'm bringing the whole wetsuit, but it looks like it's going to be a tough course.
The weather for Saturday night, Sunday morning, it has a low of 58 and a high of 78. So that's going to be one of the warmer, along with Atlanta, one of the warmer courses. But you're right, we're going to be in the water a lot.
Obviously towards morning is when it's going to get the coldest. And I don't know. I mean, that Arctica enema, thankfully that's like it looks like the last like water obstacle if a guy makes, Funky Monkey and Hang Time and all those. So a guy could maybe warm up through there, but that first half, it's a lot of water. It's going to be cold, I think. But who knows? I guess, you don't know till you're a couple laps into it. So,
well, let's start at the beginning. It's going to be at an airport just outside of Chicago. So, looking at the map from the top, it looks like a pretty flat course. What are your thoughts on the flat course versus like the hills we had in Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, that should make it easier. There is some topography there, obviously they're trying to maximize it, around like that river or, it looks like a river there. So I think this should be a lot easier. We should be able to get, better speed on the runs. I guess it kind of depends, on how like hard the course is. That was the one thing about Vegas is that it's really rocky. And so where it was, I don't know, you don't have a lot of slipping. Like even in like Minneapolis on that one, there's a lot more like mud, like just in the trail. And so it made it harder. Like it was slower because of that.
Let's talk about the obstacles. The first obstacle after we start will be Tube Tide. Do you know Tube Tide?
Yeah, so, a lot of these, I don't know. So I was online looking at them. So that one, it looks like you slide down into water, through a culvert into water, and then you like go back out through a culvert.
Any thoughts on getting through those the culverts, the black pipes they have?
I'm hoping that there's a rope, on the one that sloped upwards, just to pull a guy up on there. But, I mean, I don't know, guys just got to jump in and do it. So
right after Tube Tide is Skid Marked.
Yeah, so that one, I don't know. I think that one's pretty simple. It's at a wall, like, 7 or 8 feet tall. It's sloping a little bit. That one, it seems intimidating when you're coming up to it, but, yeah, a guy can get over it pretty easily, I think. It's
sloping toward you, sort of an incline against you.
Yeah, and I think that makes it a little bit easier because you can, kind of, jump up and, get it in, your armpits. And then, swing over it, it seems like, so.
The third obstacle is Mud Mile 2.0.
Yeah, so there's nothing easy about this one, It's just muddy. It's muddy and it's long and there's a lot of it. That's definitely, I'd say a partner obstacle. If a guy can, bend down and, give a knee to step on and then somebody else pull you over, that's about the only way to do it, I think.
Mud Mile has these trenches. If you're running, east to west, the trenches run north to south. And they've been digging these trenches a lot deeper over the last year or so. Just, I think, to encourage the teamwork, like you said, you can't do it by yourself. After Mud Mile 2.0 is Kiss of Mud 2.0, crawling under barbed wire.
Yeah, so this one, in Vegas, that one kept drying out all the time because it was, sandy and rocky. But in Minneapolis, I dove into that one and my whole head went underwater, and it wasn't water. I mean, it was mud. And I think we're gonna have the same thing here. It's gonna be dirty. It's gonna leave you caked and nasty coming out of it.
Is there a way to get through that fast or without getting snagged?
I think just kind of embrace the mud, I mean, you can't really stay out of it. Just get low and get through it. And I think, I'm wearing something long sleeve helps. Because I think, at Worlds I went, I had shorts on and a short sleeve. And when I came back after the second or third lap, my knees were bleeding and my elbows were bleeding. Which was okay because then I put on my wetsuit and it was fine. But I don't know. I'm thinking of wearing something long sleeve if I can, just to like protect against abrasions a little bit. Because on those, you're digging your elbows and you're on your knees. So,
are you bringing a windbreaker to Chicago, Eric?
I think so. Maybe I wasn't gonna, but I was reading something or watching something, and I was like, hey, that might be a good idea. Just to keep a little bit of warmth in without a wetsuit.
I think it's a good idea. I'm going to bring one. You can get a cheap one from Target for $15, and that if it gets trashed, you just leave in the garbage when you leave.
Yeah, I think I'll do that then. Yeah, absolutely.
After Kiss of Mud is the Block Ness Monster.
So that's the Tough Mudder favorite there, and it's a fun obstacle. It's really pretty easy if you have enough people. And I think on this course that won't be a problem because, and the other thing about Toughest and World's Toughest, everybody that was there pretty much knew how to do it. Where on regular Tough Mudders, it seems like, you almost have to stop and teach people how to, let it pull them over and then turn around and pull it down as they're going. So I don't think that should be much of a problem because, it's 8 hours and we should have plenty of people there all the time.
After Block Ness Monster is the Kishwaukee Crusade.
So I don't really even know what this is. Is that kind of just a swimming water obstacle?
The Kishwaukee is the river that runs just east of the airport, and so it looks just like a river crossing. Okay,
that's what I kind of thought it was. Okay, that makes sense.
Now they might make it a traverse where you have to go across a rope, maybe, and if you fall in the water, there's a penalty loop. But I would imagine it's just get from here to there and they get you wet again.
Okay, yeah.
But we'll have to see when we get there. The next obstacle is Augustus Gloop. What is Augustus Gloop?
Okay, so this is a really fun obstacle. I think it seems intimidating, but it's not really at all. When you come up to it, there's the pit of water. It's probably 4 to 5 feet deep, maybe. And so you jump into the water, and then they may or may not have a wire over the water to keep your head low. And so then you go in there, and there's these vertical culverts that have a slight angle with a ladder, a wooden ladder sort of. It's basically plywood with little toe holes cut in it, and it's probably 15 to 20 feet tall. And then you crawl up that. And then while you're crawling up that, there's water pouring down from the top on your head. And so, but for some reason, that water, pouring down on top of you makes it seem really, really cold. It's a cold obstacle. And the key to this one is they have a ladder, on both sides of the culvert. The key is to just put your back on the one side and only use one ladder and just go, 1 foot over the other all the way up. And it's pretty fast.
Augustus Gloop is one of the scariest looking obstacles, but it's actually one of the easier ones.
Yes. Yep.
After Augustus Gloop is Black Hole. Do you know Black Hole?
No, I don't.
Black Hole is the hard version or the Legionnaire version of Birth Canal, where you crawl underneath they have basically sacks of water that you have to crawl underneath, each one. And as you're crawling under them, the sacks are pushing you against the ground. I think it's designed to induce claustrophobia, kind of like Augustus Gloop, but in a different way. You don't get wet. Okay. They're pushing you toward the ground and pushing your body against the dirt. Black Hole has black tarps on the sides and at the front, at the entrance and the exit, so that you're doing the Birth Canal obstacle in the dark.
Okay, yeah, and that's a tough obstacle just because, all that weight on you and stuff. I did the Tough Mudder, and, it's not hard. It's not hard, but it's tiring. You do that, all night long, it tires the guy out.
After Black Hole is Stage 5 Clinger.
I'll be honest, when I saw this, because they introduced this last year for World's Toughest Mudder, and when I saw this, I was like, oh, shoot, I hope I can do that, It looked really hard, and it is hard, but, there are people that would, crawl up It's basically like an L. You crawl up the wall, and then you take monkey bars backwards, and then you have to like get over this L on to the top of it. And there were people that would, crawl up the ladder, grab the monkey bars, and then put their feet on somebody else's shoulder, and they like walk them to the end, and then like give them a little boost.
The next obstacle, the 10th obstacle, is Operation. So first of all, what is Operation?
Okay, so this is the one where you have like the wall with a little hole in it, probably like a 4-inch round hole, and you're standing in water holding a metal pipe like about 10 feet long, and you have to stick the pipe through that little hole with electrical ring around it, and then grab a bracelet off another wall that's like 6 feet behind that. And obviously if you wobble the pipe enough and it, the metal pipe touches the metal ring, you get shocked. So, that one, I don't know. It really hits you. I did that 9 times correctly, at Worlds. And that one time, like, I don't know what I was doing. You're trying to watch the bracelet 6 feet back there and shine your headlamp through and like, do all this stuff at once. And I hit the ring, and holy man, did it nail me. And it threw me off enough, that I started wobbling more. And then I hit it again, and I let out another yell. And but I hung on to it, and I got my bracelet and handed it to them, and off I went. So, it's not like physically demanding, really. But mentally it can wear a person down, especially when they're already tired. So,
in Whistler at the last toughest race, the holes were probably 50% larger than they were in Vegas.
No kidding.
So the hole that you look through that has the electrified ring, that you're right up against. So that made it a little bit easier, but still, you touch it, you get shocked.
Yeah.
The next obstacle is Arctic Enema, the rebirth.
Yeah, so there's nothing easy about this one. I mean, it's just bloody cold. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like, the first time I did this was at the Tougher Mudder, and it was so hot. And we were like, oh yeah, oh man, it's so bloody cold. Like, you can't, even when it was hot, you couldn't enjoy it. I just remember, I think my nuts like sucked up inside of me. It was so cold. And you slide down, the pipe into the water, and then, they have like the, something across there to make you like get back underwater again. So it's like total submersion, and it's just bloody cold. So
this year at LA, Toughest Mudder LA was the coldest Arctic Enema I've ever been in my life. And if you talk to people who were there, I promise you that's the first thing they'll say is that was the cold. Other than the hills at LA, the first thing they'll talk about is that Arctic Enema. And then in Atlanta, there was no ice in it. There were a few. It was kind of like a cool bath.
Really?
So there's this wide spectrum of, how Arctic Enema could be. So we'll see.
Yeah. Hopefully it's like Atlanta. So.
Okay, right after Arctic Enema is Funky Monkey the Revolution. What is Funky Monkey the Revolution?
Okay, so this one can be kind of brutal. This one I think is a real mental challenge because you're looking, there's like ascending monkey bars, and then there's like horizontal wheel, and so you climb up these monkey bars, grab that wheel, and it like spins down, and then there's like 3 more wheels that are vertical, and you grab those and it swings you forward, and they keep getting smaller as you go. I remember the first time I went up to that one, I was like, oh shoot, I don't know if I can do this. And I did it. But this is more of the grip strength and arm strength thing. So
something to think about is Funky Monkey is right after the Arctic Enema, so you're going to be soaking wet. Your hands are going to be wet, and even if you manage to dry your hands off, the people in front of you probably had wet hands.
Yeah, that's going to make this obstacle really tough. Are they going to have, like, on these obstacles, are they all going to have penalty loops, or will some be, like, must-complete obstacles, or how is that going to be, do you think?
Some will have penalties. Funky Monkey will have a penalty. Arctic Enema will not have a penalty.
Okay.
It just depends on the obstacle. Generally, they say the obstacles that do not have penalties, if you can't complete them, then you probably aren't, strong enough or healthy enough to be out on the course at that time.
Yep.
So obstacles like Mud Mile will not have a penalty loop. Kiss of Mud will not have a penalty loop. Blockness Monster will not have a penalty loop. But Stage 5 Clinger will. Operation will. Funky Monkey will.
Okay.
My kind of rule of thumb is if I'm going to fail the obstacle, I like to fail it quickly because I like to, as much as possible preserve the arm strength. And then if you're going to have to do the penalty loop anyway, you might as well start it as soon as possible.
Yeah, I totally agree, because a guy can spend a lot of energy trying to complete an obstacle and then do the penalty anyway.
Speaking of obstacles that I fail, the next obstacle is hang time.
Yeah, so I've never done this, but it looks really cool. Tell me about it, Will.
Hang time is a update of King of the Swingers, where you stand on a platform about 10 to 12 feet above the water. You jump out and you grab a bar that's on a pendulum. So while you're hanging onto this bar, it swings you forward. And when you get to the end of the arc, you need to reach out with one hand and grab onto a cargo net that is suspended, not facing you, but narrow the narrow way away from you. So, and then you grab onto it, transfer your weight to the cargo net, and then the cargo net is stationary, but it's on a long cable, a rubberized cable going down to the ground. So you work your way down the cargo net, then you get on the cable and you slide your way down the cable, and if you complete it successfully, you stay dry. But it's there's two difficult parts. One is the transition from the pole or from the bar to the net, and then the second one is the transition from the net to the cable, which is actually a lot easier than the first transition. I haven't been able to. I've done it, 3 toughest mudders now, and I haven't nailed it yet. This is, for some reason, this obstacle owns me. But I've seen different strategies for doing it. Some people, when they swing, instead of reaching out with one hand, they actually reach out with their feet and grab the cargo net. And then once they have some weight transferred to the cargo net, then they reach out with their hand and grab it. When it first started, when people were trying to, jump off the bar with both hands and then grab onto the cargo net with both hands. But that's and some people were able to make that work, but it's a lot more energy and a lot, energy expended to accomplish that. I think the simplest way to do it is just like people do when they're doing King of the Swingers to hit the bell. You jump on there, you wait till the very end of your arc, and you reach out with one hand and grab it. So for a split second, you're holding onto the bar with one hand, and you're holding onto the net with the other hand. And then you move your other hand to the net and your feet up to the net.
It looks pretty technical,
Yeah, don't be surprised if you fail it miserably your first time. And the best thing about Hang Time and Funky Monkey the Revolution is that if you fail, you don't like gracefully fall in the water. You fall flailing, and it's a fun obstacle to watch other people do too. After Hang Time is T-boned. T-boned is the Berlin walls with a shelf coming out toward you.
Yeah, so I'll be interested to see, how I do on this one because I've never done that. I've just done the Berlin Wall. It seems like it's a lot more difficult. So
it's kind of like a miniature Stage 5 Clinger. The hard part of Stage 5 Clinger when you're trying to do that pull-up or that muscle-up to get yourself over the edge?
Yeah.
It's kind of like going straight to that step in Stage 5 Clinger. The most important thing is just get someone to help you and get over that. And there's probably going to be a penalty loop for T-bone. There has been in the past. The last 3 obstacles after T-boned is Everest 2.0.
Yeah, so, there's nothing easy about Everest 2.0. It's just, a guy's just got to run hard and, just do it. And hope there's somebody out on the top to help you over, really. It's one of those obstacles that it takes a lot of energy, and you just there's no other way.
They have, at Toughest Mudder, they'll also have, you remember from World's Toughest, they had that grappler obstacle where you went up to the hill and you had a rope and you had to throw it up and to get it in those V-shaped notches.
Yep.
And then you can pull yourself up. Half of the Everest 2.0 will be the grappler. So if you can't make it up 2.0, if you're by yourself maybe, and there's no one out there in the middle of the night, 4 a.m, you can do the grappler and pull yourself up that way.
Oh, that'll be really nice.
And Everest 2.0 usually has a penalty loop. The next to last obstacle is Pyramid Scheme.
Is it going to be just like at the Tough Mudders where they don't have that rope or whatever in it?
It'll be pretty much more or less the same as World's Toughest.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was very doable. I mean, there was a little technique involved, but once the guy got it down, he could pretty much power over it. So,
what's the technique to get up there?
Is what I did is I'd reach up, jump up and grab that little stub of rope and then stand on it with a foot and then, reach up and grab, I think they had that tail then from the top, you could just like grab it with your like fingertips. And then you could pull yourself up the rest of the way. And that was that was the only way I saw people doing it. And it might be harder. I use like mud shoes with a really good grip, aggressive grip. So it really held that rope good. I think if somebody's doing it with more like a running shoe, it'd be harder. But it's still, doable by yourself.
The last obstacle is Calm.
So this one, I'll be honest, I hate this obstacle. I just do I did it they had it at the Tough Mudder for like the Legionnaires, and I did it and it was fun. It was no big deal, but it was dry. It was nice out and whatever. I don't know. I hate like the long fall. It's just tough. If you get your timing off or whatever and your hands start to slip. The one thing I did learn on this one is that like if your hand is starting to slip and you're like, oh shoot, I'm losing my grip, just transfer your hand so you have 2 hands on one ring, and then you can get your grip back, and then just kind of continue on till you make it to the other side.
What are your goals for Toughest Mudder Chicago?
Well, obviously we're going to do the 25 miles so that we can get the contender status, because our whole goal here is to get a better, pit placement for Worlds. And the other thing is that, obviously to have a good time and have fun and, push ourselves. But I'm excited because I'm bringing my wife, Kitten, and my 9-year-old son. He's going to run the mini mudder on Sunday. And I'm also bringing my wife to Worlds this year. So I'm excited to have them like experience Tough Mudder and like kind of the community and that stuff. And it's going to be fun running with you, Will. You're always a fun guy, and and my brother. So, I guess that's it. 25 miles, and then just to enjoy it. And if we can do more than that, cool. And if not, that's great. So,
what about World's Toughest this year? What are you shooting for?
I was thinking, I was going to try for 75 miles, but holy man, 25 more miles, 25, that distance from 50 to 75, it's a long stinking ways. I don't know. I think that's going to still like be my goal, but I don't want it to like overshadow like the experience or, the enjoyment factor, because really the reason why like I run and why I stay active and do what I do isn't because, someday I think I'm going to like win money. I'm just trying to, live a healthy lifestyle and, stay active and moving, and so I'll use, like goals to help like push myself and keep myself motivated. But really like just getting out there and like doing the run and, the train that goes up to there, to help me compete it. Just in that, I'm meeting my, my overall goal, of just general fitness and like, overall health. But I mean, if I could get the silver bib, like I'd be so stoked. Like that'd be so awesome.
Eric Dymesich, any last thoughts on Toughest Mudder, World's Toughest Mudder?
I think right before this call, I went out for like a 6-mile run, and I was just like, kind of thinking over, like the last year and a half and like, how my life has changed since Tough Mudder. I don't know. It's been really good for me. It's been healthy. It's just helped me like gain that focus. Cause I think a lot of times we, set these goals like, oh, I'm going to have a 10K speed of this or a marathon or half marathon or whatever. And like the goals in themselves are good, but they can like kind of like discourage us in the long run. Like Will Dean when he, started Tough Mudder and like kind of the, overall like focus of Tough Mudder has been, like the community and the wellness, and the camaraderie and like encouraging each other and accepting each other, where they're at in this journey. I think that's the cool thing about Tough Mudder that like sets it apart from like other, races or events. I don't know. I just encourage people, to like keep that in mind and, just enjoy the fact that, we're out there together and we're running, we're doing this and pushing ourselves and, bring other people into it. And, I always say, when you're on those really long runs or, endurance things, I always try to like stay outside of like my tunnel because I find like when I get, thinking about like the pain or the distance or this and that, like my world gets really small and I start thinking about myself and I perform worse and worse and worse. And I think like is what I learned like from like Tough Mudder is to don't get in that place, like encourage the person next to you, and help the other guy and it helps to keep you out of like that tunnel and, it just improves your whole attitude and it helps everybody around you. And that's what's so cool, about the whole event. And I'm just really excited about, Chicago this weekend. And, I don't know. And I got to say to you, Will, thanks so much, for getting me into this, man, because it's awesome.
You're welcome. Eric Dymesich, thanks much. All right, guys, I will see you in Chicago. Come up and say hi. I will be the slow guy with the bib that says Will Hicks. Have you reviewed the podcast yet on iTunes? I would appreciate it. Do me a solid, leave me a review. If you can't make it to Chicago, the next time I will probably see you at an event is at Tough Mudder SoCal or Tough Mudder Las Vegas, right before World's Toughest Mudder in November. And of course, I will see you all there. You saw the announcement from Tough Mudder headquarters, right? This is officially the last year in Vegas. We'll talk more about that next time. You guys are great. I am so proud of you.